Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. And yes, we are back here talking Scream 6. And of course, we have Evan from Rockland Graves joining us again. Sir, it is good to have you back on the show. Oh
It's good to
man.
be back. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, what a good couple of weeks it's been. We talked Scream, we talked Scream 5, got our opinions out on those. One we absolutely adore, the other one we have some opinions on. Definitely check those videos out. They are up there for your viewing pleasure, but yeah, we've all three of us have gotten to see this movie, and we have some thoughts, we have some opinions. We both have reviews out, so if you want to know our spoiler-free thoughts, just our general, what we're thinking right off the bat, you can check out each review on our channel and on Evan's channel. But this is where we're gonna take a stab, I should say, and dive into those guts and find out all the spoilery details of Scream 6.
Scream.
Yeah, I think needless to say, we kind of left off on Scream 5 saying we were pretty excited about this. I know I certainly was, and I know Evan, you were looking forward to this quite a bit. Luke, you were, like you've been quoted yourself saying, you never go into one of these Scream movies in a negative light. And I think if I'm going to kick things off here, I'm going to say that for at least the first two acts of this film, I think we were genuinely getting a fantastic Scream sequel. I was really, really into this movie. But then as the third act kind of kicks in, they just lost me again. Evan, how was your first impressions of Scream 6?
The movie took a little bit to win me over. I was glad that there was an opening scene that was unique. It was different. It was something we haven't seen before. I have some thoughts about the execution of it, but it was just nice to see something fresh. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a very similar boat to you. I was having a blast with this movie. I definitely think it's a huge improvement over. It's okay. I'll take the huge. It's an improvement over Scream 5. Um, for the first two acts. The third act, well, I don't think it's as weak as the third act in 5. I still think that the movie fell apart and just lost me at the end. So I'm very similar to you there.
And Luke, how are your thoughts now that you've had a few days to sit with it?
In Scream 5, we were kind of joking that we were kind of echoing each other throughout that, but I feel like maybe we will be doing it here a lot. Because I'll say, from the beginning here, for me, it didn't take much time to win me over. I think with that opening scene, I think it was so strong, so different that I was like, okay, it was like in a relationship where I just got ghosted, and then he shows up with flowers and candy, and I'm like, hey, I'm ready to be heard again. So after that opening, that cold open, I was like, okay, I'm on board. Let's see where we're going with this. And I think they did kind of strip away a lot of the that stupid humor that annoyed me a lot in Scream 5 for the most part. I still think they had some scenes, but I think they kind of went with a little more serious tone with Ghostface and everything. But yeah, after that third act, I'll tell you, I was like, we're still struggling here. It was like the wheels were coming off, and we were trying to get to that finish line. And you definitely felt it, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, no, I agree with you guys. Yeah, I think we're all in agreement there that it had a really strong couple of acts and then it just gets lost. But let's dive into that opening scene. Like that's really where, now that we got that out, I want to talk about it because it's very different than what we've gotten in the past from Scream. And I will say, like, I think most of the openings are pretty unique throughout these films. I think, the first one, obviously, all time classic. We got to gush about it in our review. The second one with the movie theater, people really love it. I think it's pretty fun. I think it's cool. A little bit of a kind of, I have a hard time believing that everybody would just be so wild and riled up that they wouldn't believe this woman is dying and just dying on the front, but whatever. 3 is okay. I mean, Cotton Weary getting killed is interesting, but 4 probably the weakest. I don't know where you guys sit with that. It's the one where it's like the opening within an opening within an opening. But yeah, 5 again brings us back to the original. Very gritty, very harsh. This one, lots of twists and turns. I was into it. I mean, I could kind of say, I think was it our trailer 2 reaction, Luke, where I said I think that Samara Weaving is going to be the opening kill.
Yep.
And that held true. That was something that definitely happened. And you know, her kill was pretty weak, and I was pretty underwhelmed at first. But when they just kept going, and then we kept following, I don't know the actor's name, but Flash from Spider-Man, we just kept going with him and seeing his whole side of things. I was like, damn, this is really unique. This is really cool. You know, a bit of a stretch, maybe, now that I've had some time to think about it, but it is one of those things where I was just like, I like this. I like seeing the killer's perspective, and then having another killer kind of come in and do that. It does lose some steam with me because of the third act. But Evan, how'd you feel about this opening?
Yeah, it was, again, like, I think it's probably the most interesting for me since the first movie's opening scene. I was the most drawn in by what it set up. Really my only issues were where I felt like the dude who killed Samara Weaving, I felt like he was just like a little too chill when he got home. Like, I wanted to see a bit more intensity in his performance. He's just kind of like, yeah, I was just at the store, bought some eggs, killed a go around. Do you want to watch a movie? Or like, I was like, I wanted to see a little more kind of edge to that.
Mhm.
And I really like how it establishes the killer, because having this first kill happen, and then we're very used to being like, okay, here's our Ghostface. This is cool. But then you've got the real Ghostface who comes in and fucks shit up. You're like, okay, that's a really cool way to set up this movie's Ghostface, by kind of trying to say, like, this is a step above other ones that we've seen. So that was really cool. It was extremely unique. I thought, up until the point where the reveal of who it was actually happened, it was really, really cool. Just a lot of the stuff in the apartment wasn't totally in love with, aside from, again, how that establishes the killer.
Mhm. And Luke, how do you feel about the opening?
The opening, I'm a huge fan of. I'm a big fan of Scream 2's opening as well. I like the idea of these very I don't know, like you look at the original Scream and then you look at Scream 5, and those are very personal. They're very intimate. They're one-on-one. It's very basic in terms of the slasher genre, where I like these public kind of, where there's a lot of more people involved. And as we had talked about, when we covered the trailer, and I mean, everyone talked about it, making use of New York City. And I really felt like they made use of New York City from the very beginning there, where Samara Weaving goes outside and she's looking, there's a mass of people, it doesn't feel intimate in that usual slasher way. And even her kill in the alley, for me, I was sold as soon as what we thought was going to be Ghostface took off his mask, because again, we're kind of subverting those expectations where we don't really know who it's going to be. And I was like, are we going to be following this guy knowing that he's Ghostface? And then maybe there's going to be someone else out there that we don't know who it is. And then we're going to get that whodunit kind of feel. But, he's quickly, he doesn't make it past the cold open. And, for his, I guess, demeanor, for me, it wasn't really necessarily out of place, where it's like you look at guys like Jeffrey Dahmer, where they kill people and then they're kind of just going about their day. Well, I was like, they kind of established that it's like they've been doing this, where he says he's got blue balls, and it's like, well, I had to go out and do it. So it's like almost this hunger of, this guy's pretty demented. But then you kind of heighten that with, he's meeting someone else that's even crazier than he is, So I really loved it, because it was like, I was like, okay, I'm cool with following this dude. But then as soon as another Ghostface shows up, that felt like the real deal for me. And it's like, and that's where, looking at this film, and we talked about it in our review, where I think they did a good job at making Ghostface feel a little more brutal in this one. And I think you really do feel that, where it's like, this guy comes home, he's talking about groceries and whatever he's doing in film class and all this stuff, but then there's another Ghostface there that's just there to kill. And it's like, I think that really set the tone for this. So for me, I love the opening of the original as well as 2, but this one is right up there for me.
Yeah, no, it's impactful. I enjoy it a lot. I think that one of the elements that really, I agree with you, Luke, that I think sets this one apart so much is just that unveiling, and just like having the balls to do that. It really did set me into the seat of just saying, we are totally doing something new here. We are definitely not going to be retreading elements from the other movies as we continue on. And I was so excited for that. I really enjoyed all of it. Something that I feel like we did not discuss very much at all in our reviews, which I think is kind of a bit of an oversight from us, is just Roger Jackson's performance as the voice of Ghostface. And yeah, we that was a little oversight on our part. He's so fucking good in this. I think that a lot of people don't realize that that's not just a voice modulation, that is an actual voice actor performing those lines. And it's one of those things where in this scene, especially with him just toying with someone else who's already a killer, we've already seen them kill, it really felt like another level of just like, yeah, we're going to see this. Like, we're going to see this almost possibly. And I heard someone else say this in their review. I can't say who, because I don't remember. I watched a bunch of them just to get other people's opinions. But it was one of those things where it's like they said maybe they're setting up that this ghost face is almost going to be like an anti-hero and he's going to be going after other ghost faces, but to the point where it's not like he's a full-blown hero. But like, I'm like, that's something interesting, maybe he's just killing the copycat killers and killing our characters. Like, he's just going on a full massacre here. Like, these are very interesting elements. And the last element I want to touch on in just my part of this segment is just when he walks by Jenna Ortega in the opening and he just talks to her for a brief second, and after you just see him murder this girl and everything, I was like, this is great. Like, I love the tension they built there with that, of just like, she has no idea. And they're really setting the stage here of like this college town where it's like, yeah, he just murdered somebody like maybe 5-6 miles from here. And he just walked back to school and he's just getting back in and everything's cool. And our characters are all here. So it's just like, I was really digging it. I really think there's a lot of great elements there. But again, as we'll continue on, it gets hindered a little bit.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes that occurred with this movie was the marketing shoving down your throat that this is different, and then opening it with something where you're like, oh, it actually is. Because we'll get into it. They don't keep that up.
Mm-hmm.
It's not different. it's very much retreading old ground. So as much as I love all this stuff and we're praising it because it's great, it kind of ends up hurting the experience because you get excited for something and then totally blue-balled. It doesn't, they don't stick with it enough. But part of the issue is I watched Halloween Ends the night before I saw it, so I was actually watching a very different movie in a franchise.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was very frustrating to have such a solid setup. So while I love it, I think that the rest of the movie hinders it.
Yeah. And Luke, you got any final thoughts on the opening there?
Nothing that I hadn't already said, but it's just like Evan is saying, it does set up for something that you're feeling is going to be extremely different. And for such a strong opening like that, to kind of get what we get by the end of this, and again, I think the writers maybe go back into trying to shoehorn things in. I think makes it more difficult to watch that opening, to be like, oh my gosh, we are on for a different feeling scream and a thrill ride, and then it kind of just fizzles out by the end of it.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Evan, to bring up, because it's like that is something I didn't even consider, is when I go back and rewatch it, because again, it was one of those parts that I really enjoyed coming out of it for the first time. And again, I think all of us, we've only all seen it one time, so let's put that out there here too. But like, it is something where I am curious to see how this movie plays on a second viewing, with some of this in mind. But one of the things I feel like made a major improvement that I want to move on to next is our cast. I think that I kind of really enjoyed our characters, more so in this than I did in the previous. But I think there is one really big piece of character assassination in this movie. But before we kind of dive into that, I want to know your guys' thoughts. Like, how are we feeling about like our fresh face, or the core four as they call themselves? Like, I don't necessarily care about the new additions as much, but the core four themselves, I think, have really started to grow on me in this film. I think that I enjoyed their, not only their performances more, but just their camaraderie. They actually felt like friends more so in this film than they did in the last.
Yeah, I agree with you that I think the core four, the people who are returning from Scream 5, the survivors from last year, it feels like those actors have actually spent a lot of time together off screen, and it really shows. Like, the chemistry between them felt so much more natural. I thought the dialogue between characters was a lot more entertaining and engaging. It was less annoying. Um, and their performances, it felt like the actors settled into those roles very well. And it just, I think it was a step up in terms of how believable their relationships felt and their friendships. Now, the new characters that this movie introduces are fucking ridiculous. There's literally nothing to talk about with any of the new characters. They're just, I think I said it in my review, like, there are new characters and that's all there is to say about them. And that's like, man, so the core four is great, and that more than made up for it. I wasn't actively irritated by how underdeveloped the rest of the cast was, but it was just something I was thinking about after the movie.
Absolutely. Luke, your thoughts on the cast?
I think this installment, did wonders for the Tara Sam relationship. Kind
Mhm.
of Sam taking on that motherly role and really looking out for Tara, and Tara just itching to get out and do her own thing, and the kind of tension that they're still building, and some of those hurt feelings, especially kind of bleeding over from 5. And even Chad, I like this kind of that they were teasing the whole Tara and Chad relationship. And Chad was someone that I could take him or leave him in 5, but I think
Mhm.
he had some pretty great character development throughout this one. I think they made a questionable choice by the end of it, and where they kind of trying to tease something and then it doesn't happen. But the Mindy character for me, I still struggle with. I feel like she's way too close to the Randy character, and I don't think they've done enough to really develop her. So anytime she's delivering those Randy-esque lines for me, I'm like, this is just a rehash from an original character. So for me, I still find her a bit annoying. So honestly, for her, I can take her or leave her. And then, all the fresh faces that we get, I'm going to be echoing Evan here, where it's like nothing stands out about them. They're just here. And it's honestly like, again, this strain for connective tissue that we need by the end of this film. And that's really just what it is. We're just going to shoehorn in new characters and then dispose of them by the end of it, really. And that's what it feels like. And going back and watching this it's probably going to stick with me. So I'm intrigued by my second watch here because I'm like, well, I know why you're here.
Yeah, I definitely, once we kind of cross into that, which we're going to get to shortly, we're going to probably have the most to talk about in that segment of just where that connective tissue lies. I want to say just a little side note on that character assassination that I was hinting towards. I really think that Gale Weathers is completely unnecessary in this movie, and all they did was really, I feel like, just kick sand in her face because you know she shows up and I was like, oh, cool, Gail's here. Yeah, well, I knew that was coming, but I'm just like, all right, let's see what she does. Immediately, all the characters hate her because she went back on her word from Scream 5. And, I guess fuck Dewey's memory and everything. I'm going to write a book about it. And it's just like, why? Like, why are you sitting in there writing this screenplay and you're just like, yeah, it's the same people. And it's like, yeah, I set this up. She's going to have some major character growth, which we didn't really touch on it, but it is something, after watching it again after our review of just like, okay, yeah, Gail at least has some growth there. But again, they don't follow through with it. And she just seems like a dick, like by just writing a book about it. And then that's pretty much it. She is there to get them to the fucking showcase or collection, whatever you want to call it. She's the one that finds the access or whatever, and that's it. After her attack, she's completely gone. And I think where we all agree that they probably shouldn't have killed Dewey in 5. Again, we are Dewey fans, so it's like, say call us fanboys or whatever. I think, again, pulling the punch of Gale felt even worse because it's like, guys, what the fuck? Like the fact that they literally didn't even leave us there for a minute to sit on that, where it's like, oh, is Gail dead? Is she not? No, they literally had the paramedics say she's got a weak pulse like 2 seconds after everything. It's like, guys, like, what are you doing? Like, you don't know what to do with these legacy characters. And again, they just kicked sand in their face again, and it just frustrates me.
Yeah, this movie really showed me how much these writers fear changing certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Because the thing you were alluding to with Chad, where they kind of faked something out, similar to what happened with Gale,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, they're just replacing Dewey with Chad. They're making him be kind of the goofy, lovable guy who's going to almost die at the end of every movie, but he's never actually going to die until Scream 10 or whatever the fuck. So, like, that, I was like, okay, so you're replacing Dewey with Chad. You're replacing, you know, you've got Mindy in there now, who's just another character replacement. It feels like, yes, there is less of the legacy cast, but it kind of feels like they're just remaking old Scream movies with a lot of it. Like, looking back, the first one's very much kind of a loose remake of the first movie, and this is very much a loose remake of Scream 2, and I think that rings true with a lot of the characters. The pulling the punch with Gale was really frustrating. And like, as soon as those paramedics come through the door, you're like, oh, okay, so she's fine. She's
My
not going to
exact
die.
thoughts, exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
it was so frustrating to sit there because I'm like, oh shit, they're actually doing this. And you know what? It kind of feels fitting at this point. Nev Campbell is out. I don't know what's going to happen with Scream 7, but right now she's out.
Mm-hmm.
Dewey, gone. Let's kill Gale and focus on the strong cast of characters that we're now working with. Let this new cast carry this franchise. Because otherwise it feels completely pointless. Why is Gale even in this movie? She's not developing at all. She's made the same mistake in every single fucking Scream movie. They all open with her regressing on any development she's made, going back and writing some, really unethical book about the events of the previous movie. It happens every single goddamn time. I really wish they would have changed it. It's especially frustrating, again, because of how much they tried to shove down that this is a different Scream movie. Actually make it different. It would have been really interesting to see that character get killed off, especially when Dewey just died.
Mm-hmm. And with it being a year apart and all.
Yeah, it would have been a really interesting and bold choice, and they missed it. I mean, again, who knows what's going to happen with 7, but we can't, we got to work with what we have right now.
Mm-hmm.
And what we have is a really lame storyline for our legacy characters.
Absolutely. And Luke, how do you feel about Gale Weathers?
For me, I don't think my source of contention was character assassination for me, where it was more so rehashing. She does do the same thing almost in every installment of
It's
this, where
absurd.
there ends up being this tension between, a gap between, 1 and 2, 2 and 3, where it's like, well, Gail, we don't like you because you did something, and there's always this tension there. And I was like, okay, well, we're just redoing this, and then you can take anything that Gale added to this film, which isn't much, and take those attributes and put them into a different character that has been more so established in this new installment, and nothing would be missed, because we didn't even get, yes, Dewey's death was a big talking point. And I think you got more mileage out of him in 5. And it's like in 6, we don't even get a talking point of Gale's death because, again, they decide to pull back on that one. So it's like there's really nothing here for Gale. It's just one of those things where a glorified cameo at best, I think, and just a chase scene between Ghostface and Gale, and that's really all we get here. And it's and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I'm gonna bring up keeping Dewey any chance that I get, and it's like how more interesting would this film have been with all these, with Kirby being in the FBI. It's like to have Dewey, a sheriff from Woodsboro, show up in New York and try to kind of connect all these dots. I think that would have been a way more interesting dynamic throughout this entire film, rather than just keeping Gale and having her almost die, but not at all.
No, I agree. And so, for the sake of time, I know we could probably talk about this point for a while. I do want to touch on just a rapid fire of a couple things. is just one. You guys have talked about Mindy, and there was a scene, and we haven't gotten to talk about it yet. So I actually think that Mindy was a little bit better in this movie. I think that out of the three of us, I'm going to say I'm probably the most positive on her. I actually liked her explanation of this being about franchises. I think that the film itself has no idea what it's trying to do with that concept, because I don't think they follow through with it at all, other than just referencing other ghost faces. Because, you know, with this, I'm going to say that, they have them saying this about franchises. They allude to things like Stu Macher, if you believe he's dead. They have this guy dropping Ghostface masks. And the fact that, and I'll just say it now, but we'll touch on it here towards the end. The fact that the killers have nothing to do with said franchise and they are new to the story, it's garbage. Like, it's literally has nothing to do with, the idea of franchises, and the fact that they say everybody's on the table, everybody can be killed, and nobody
Bullshit.
of our main characters die. Not one of them. They all pull their punches there. And so, although I think that Mindy has grown on me, and I think that she delivered that scene a lot more, I think, interestingly, I feel like she's more comfortable. I thought it was a little funnier. I think that they didn't follow through with it from the writer's perspective, the filmmaker's perspective. They didn't follow through with it at all. So again, it amounts to kind of nothing. But if I'm going to give her any credit, that's where it's going to lie for me, is that I actually enjoyed that sequence. And I enjoyed Mindy. Again, if she would have died on the subway, that would have been a really great scene, a really great death. I love the fact that they kind of misconstrued us with the trailer, that they're not all together. But they pull that punch, and it's just like, guys, what are you doing? Like, frustrates me, man.
I'm actually, I want to clarify. I also really like Mindy. My issue is that she's just another example of this movie retreading old ground.
And
I
I'll
do
give that
think,
to you guys. Yeah, that's
yeah,
very true.
I do think that she's a big improvement over her character in 5, who just annoyed the ever-loving shit out of me. And here I was actually more engaged in what she had to say, because it felt less contrived. It felt less on the nose. It was a little more interesting, even though what she says isn't necessarily true in terms of the film's structure and how things play out towards the end. Um, yeah, I'm thinking about sequences now. So we'll move on to Luke, because I know we're going to get to, like, some
The
of the
big
set
one here.
pieces in a
I'll
minute.
let
Yeah.
it go in a second, but
Yeah.
I'll let the cork off. But Luke, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I know that these kind of explanations are a staple in the Scream franchise, but like I feel like 1 through 3 found they had that workaround with Randy, where it's like even after his death, they had the tape and his sister brought that and everything. Whereas Mindy here, I feel like they want to write her as the Randy Meeks character, smartest person in the room, and then her basic character development is that she doesn't know what she's talking about and she gets it wrong. She even says it on the nose at the end of it. She doesn't know what exactly, is going on. I'm wrong again. So, for me, where you look at Chad, at least he kind of moved on in terms of developing a relationship, I think. Whereas Mindy is just kind of, for me, spinning her tires, I don't know, like, for me, like writing screenplays where it's sometimes I feel like a weakness of, if we change a race or sexual orientation, that's enough character development. And I don't know necessarily that they're focusing enough on the Mindy character. It's like I would have loved to have her have her own scenes, maybe even without Tara or Sam or even Chad in that. Let's focus on her relationship a little bit more and really start opening up that character, where it's like she seems to get lost in the shuffle all the time and not really getting her moments at all, I don't think. So it's like I can't really think of a scene other, she had with whatever the new character's name is that is dispatched by the end of it, Jack Champion's character. She only had those scenes really, and those were very brief, and then she ended up almost dead by the end of it. So it's like, for me, it's hard for me to say that she had any character development. It's really just seems like a rehash of the Randy Meeks character for me.
I was trying to think of his name for you, but it wasn't coming. But I think, yeah, why don't we just let the cork off? Let's talk about the ending in this. So we get down to the brass tacks. We have that. Uh, Everything's kind of moving at this point. We're getting to the point where it's like, okay, is it Kirby who's the killer? Which I thought, okay, that would have been kind of wild to see an actual returning cast member that we didn't expect kind of become the killer and go crazy. Like, that's interesting. And then they start popping up with Ghostface and everything. It's just like, okay, so we've got like 3 here potentially. And yeah, the fact that it's the fucking what is he, a detective?
Yeah.
It's the Redditor's family, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, that's if
We
there
can't
you go.
escape it.
It's all good. But yeah, that, oh my god, when that happened, it was it really gave me, and I know you're a Halloween Ends fan, so I'm not, no shade. I absolutely appreciate that you love that movie. I think that I had a very visceral reaction to that. Luke, you can confirm this. It felt like the same thing again, where the movie hit a point where I was just like, damn it, now I'm just waiting for it to end. I just sat there like, this is fucking bullshit, man. You spend the entire movie setting yourself apart, doing everything you can to kind of show us and lead us that, like, yeah, we're doing something different. And yes, it's the Redditor's family, it's Richie's family. And it's like, this is just fucking, I think I said it to you, Luke. This is just Scream 2, but instead of Mickey, you replace him with the 2 kids and the dad instead of Billy's mom. It's like, that's all this was. This isn't new. This is fucking lazy. Like, this is stupid. Like, it's just so contrived and so out there. Like, I built this collection of all this memorabilia, evidence, everything. It's just like, Jesus Christ, even if you were, like, super detective, like, do you think how hard it would be to get this? Like, how contrived, all for your son because he liked horror movies? Like, my dad fucking loves me. I'm so blessed to have a great father in my life. But like, he would not go to this length for me. You know what I mean? Like, that's just absurd. I wouldn't expect him to do that. Like, it's just all so broad and just so frustrating. It really, it did it for me. As soon as that reveal happened, I said, I'm fucking done.
Yeah, I thought the fucking subreddit reveal in Scream 5 was one of the dumbest things ever. And the last thing I wanted was to have killers be related to anything to do with that plot line. As soon as it was confirmed that that's what was going on and that the killers were these, like, the horny roommate and the random fucking geeky dude who were barely in the movie. They had absolutely no development. They didn't do anything interesting. They didn't have many interactions with the characters. And again, on a movie that is kind of paying homage to a whole franchise by counting down. That was so interesting to me. How they were like, "Oh, this is the mask from Scream 5 and this is
I
the one
liked
from
that.
4 and this
I
is the one
did.
from 3." I'm like, "Oh shit. Where is this going?" That was really cool, and I felt like there was an opportunity for such a huge, like, oh my god reveal at the end with that. That kind of buildup should be saved for something where you're hitting a fucking home run for the franchise. You can't do that and then just be like, oh yeah, but it's just these guys, their kid died. That sucks. Like, what are you talking about? It was one of the most deflating reveals of the series, and I tend to get a little annoyed with Scream movie killer reveals. They lose me a lot of the time. I know I'm kind of in a minority there. I tend to disengage from the Scream movies at that point. But like, this was just absurd with how lazy and contrived, and it was clearly just, oh, we're kind of redoing the original trilogy. Which is like, is fucking
What's the
Scream
point?
7 just going to be Scream 3 again?
Yeah, she's got a long lost brother.
Yeah,
that,
like I
Billy
don't
had. Like,
I don't want to do that again. There are flaws with the structure of those movies. Don't retread that ground. Improve on it. You can reference things and pay homage to them, but there's a difference between paying homage to something and loving something about a movie and just straight up just doing it again because it's what happened before and people will remember that and go, oh yeah. It's a very, very lackluster reveal. And I love Dermot Mulroney. I don't know if I'm the only one who thought this, but his performance was kind of weak at the end.
terrible at the end.
Yeah, it
Like,
wasn't.
honestly, he was
I don't know what
fine
happened
throughout
because
the
he's really
movie,
good.
but yeah, no, I thought he was
Also,
awful.
how interesting would Dewey have been as a counterpoint to him through that movie?
Luke brought that
That
up when
that
we
would
got
be
out of the
such a
theater.
cool thing to do, and they can't because they wasted it. Because this new Scream movies are wasting their characters in a lot of ways.
Luke, hop in this. What do you give us your thoughts?
Listen, I love the third act. I thought it was the best. Now, uh, like for me, like looking at this, this is how this is how I feel. Is like screenwriters, they had like 3 months, and they're like, oh, we're gonna give them something new and different here, and then they just spend time to write, and it's like, oh man, we're doing something different, we're great, and then it's like, "Oh, wait, we have 24 hours left, we haven't even done the third act. What's worked in the last one?
Like how I
It
make
feels
my
like
videos.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like that's just how revert. They reverted back to initially what we do in any of the Scream films, and so it was like we get 2 acts of new and interesting things, and we're building this of we think we're going to answer this big question of why are we leaving Mask? What's going on here? And it's like, oh wait, it's just it's Richie's family. Oh, it's like I'm convinced in the 7th installment there's going to be an entire stab subreddit, and we're going to get like 100 different Ghostface, just like Riddler and Batman. It's like I really feel like it's just going to be that exact thing. It's just so for me like this. It tarnished what we were seeing. Sometimes and a lot of times endings make films, and this one it was just like they could not follow through with it. And again, like as soon as we get on the unveil, I think it deflates the demeanor of Ghostface throughout, where it's like, because I felt Ghostface was brutal throughout the rest of this, and then I'm
Mhm.
watching it, I'm like, I'm not feeling that same emotion that I did when he had the mask on. It's like, you
Not
know,
once.
yeah,
No.
and it's just like, it's hard for me to believe that Jack Champion was some of the Ghostface that I had seen prior in the rest of this film. It's like for me, I could not believe it. So, I that third act really had again. And I'm back and watch this fully again, knowing how that third act goes because I was trying to draw parallels from the first 2 acts to that third act, and it was hard to compute in my brain of what I had previously seen as to what I'm seeing now.
It's tough, man. It is one of those things where it's like this really you bring up a great point, honestly. Like before I get into that, it's just that you do not feel that same intensity from these people. And again, that's an issue with Scream 5. Again, I do not feel like Amber is the one murdering Dewey. I don't get this sense of that at all. And it's like, at least in the first film, especially, and I mean, the first one's gold. We all know that. But I even buy it in the second film with just how crazy Mickey is and just how weird and off the wall that guy is and just how deranged Billy's mom is, that like that makes sense to me. That works. And even the third one, which, for a while was my least favorite, is one of those things where it's like, dude, yeah, no, the intensity, the viscera, like I get it. And then 4 too, I would say that's great as well. It's really these last 2 movies, it's like I don't buy. It's like it really feels like they make fun of it, how they're like, oh, in the stab movies it's always somebody else, it's never this. It's like it really feels like there should just be some supernatural force behind the mask at this point, because he feels completely different than any of the actual characters doing the deed. And this is an absolute, like, just a kick in the dick again with this, because they really do set it up to where it's like they're being different. They're this. You bring up the whole, "Oh, well, maybe it's a bunch of Redditors and stuff like that, and they're gonna do like they did with the Batman with Riddler." And I'm just sitting here like, at this point, that would have been fucking better to have this be a full-blown cult. But like, this is boring, Okay, I'm not saying it would have been perfect, but I'm saying it's like it would have been a little bit more interesting. It would have been a stab at something new. But it's like, dude, like, come on. Like, why are we just going back to the same fucking movies? Like you said, Evan, let's just remake the trilogy. Like, why? We have that. We watch it all the time. Like, I don't
Yeah.
need this.
Yeah, I think the thing where I think they're really struggling to have that continuity between the Ghostface that we see killing people throughout the movie and then who they're revealed to be at the end. What they're doing is they're making Ghostface almost like a Michael Myers, where it's this very strong, calculated, direct, competent killer. So it worked before because the reveals were often like high school students, and that worked because the way Ghostface was played was very clumsy. He was falling over himself, which worked for those reveals. They're now changing the portrayal of Ghostface, but they're not changing the archetype of character who's behind the mask, which makes this huge disconnect between most of the movie and then the actual reveal itself. The scenes with Ghostface throughout this movie are fucking awesome.
They are good.
Obviously, like that corner store scene was in all the trailers and it's great. My favorite by far was with the ladder going across those two buildings. That was fucking fantastic. I loved that sequence. I thought Ghostface was really intimidating. I love how he's fucking with her, like tilting it a little bit and shaking it around. Like it's this really brutal, cold, calculated killer who looks to be having like this sick amount of fun with it. And then it's just a geeky high school student again. It's a huge disconnect and it really doesn't work. And it's unfortunate because of how much I love the scenes with Ghostface prior to knowing who it actually is. Even right up to the moment before it happens. When they stab Chad and then the two of them look at the group and they both in unison wipe off the blood from the knife, I was like, that's fucking sweet. I love that. Up until the very moment we get the reveal, it really works. And then it just completely falls apart.
Yeah, I think that scene is cool, but as soon as they reveal who it is, I think it's stupid. It is one of those things where it's like, yeah, if they were these dedicated like cultists or fan base like nuts, I think it would have been something neat to add. And I think it's a huge missed opportunity that we even got a reveal. I think that there were a lot of people saying that they just want Ghostface to walk away. This movie, for like 90% of its runtime, I would say, was really setting up for me to be like, Ghostface is just going to get away, and that's going to be amazing. Like that's
that would have
going
been
to
different.
be insane.
That would have
And
made for an actually different Scream movie if the killer didn't get revealed. That would have been really interesting. I think that would have been a much better ending because that's never happened in one of these movies. If it ended with Ghostface getting away, everyone would walk out of that being like, holy shit.
oh yeah,
It would be so good. Now they'd have to really pay off when they eventually do reveal it. So that would, that would make things challenging. But for this movie, oh my God, that would have been cool.
Yeah, like looking at the killers, in drawing that parallel from Ghostface throughout this, I don't know. If that third act almost felt flaccid, where it was just like, I know a lot of people talk about the bodega scene, and I think that's probably probably the most evident, where it's like they build that tension, and Ghostface is just so commanding throughout this. Almost feels like a supernatural element to Ghostface, which we don't usually get in any of these. So they were building that tension, especially in that scene where, he just comes in and stabs the guy initially and then ends up with the shotgun. And we're really building. And it's like looking at that scene and then saying that the same characters in that third act after they're unmasked, it doesn't compute to me, where it's like looking at how almost whiny Jack Champion's character becomes. I'm like, I don't know who was in that Ghostface mask at that time, but even Dermot Mulroney's character, I wouldn't even buy as commanding enough to be, for me to buy that he was in that bodega. So it's like, it just seems like it loses something. I mean, as we're talking about, it doesn't feel right. Like, in line with everything we had seen up in those two acts. So it's like, for me, I just completely checked out because they're just so fumbling throughout the rest of it. It's like, I think Dylan, you brought up, Dermot Mulroney's character is charging Sam while he has a gun, and it just is like, I don't know exactly where we're going with this, where we went from the methodical feeling of a Ghostface to this kind of, we're just rushing trying to get to the end here, and these fumbling characters. It did not work for me.
I said that in the theater, yeah, when he was just the final part there where it's like he has a gun in his hand.
Yeah.
I don't even think he's out of ammo. Like, I mean, like, I know she is, but like he just goes at her and it's just like, what the fuck? Like,
yeah, I remember that. I was thinking about the same thing in the theater. That was ridiculous.
It just doesn't like read. Like, they don't seem nearly as calculated as they do behind the mask and everything. And I know other people could probably say like, oh, well, when you have the mask, it's like you're a different person. You have like a different vibe. It's like, no, dude, like that's not going to work like that. Like
To a
it's like
degree, maybe.
I would have a better time believing that from the whole Halloween Ends thing, where you put on Michael's mask and it kind of you transcend a little bit, like that I'd buy over Ghostface because it's
Well,
just
there's
like
some lore
there's
built up with that mask. They didn't do that here.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And it's like they kind of, I guess, attempt to with having the callbacks on the masks and everything, and saying, like, oh, this is your grandmother, Sam, and blah blah blah, and all that. And it's just, it never translates well. And I think another great scene of that is just so if we kind of deduce here what's going on in the film, we have the sequence in Central Park or whatever park that's supposed to be, and you know Dermot Mulroney's character is in the park. I believe Jack Champion's character is in the van with them, right? If I remember correctly.
Yes.
So are we supposed to buy that Quinn is the one attacking Gale? And I only say that because it's like, yeah, obviously, I'm not saying anything that women can't take on guys or anything like that, but like her boyfriend is like really like beefed up. Like he's like a big muscular dude. And I'm not saying that she couldn't kill him because she gets the best of him, gets behind him. But what I'm saying is, how the hell am I supposed to buy that Quinn is throwing this man through a bookshelf like WWE style and destroying all of that and throwing him like a good, 5 feet across the room? It's just kind of like that's a stretch, man. Like that's really where I start to get like you're getting really lazy here with your development and things like that. Like you got to have some kind of a consistency, at least with who is behind Ghostface at the time. And it's just like, that's just something that I thought of that was just like another, it's like, and again, this movie is not the only one in the franchise to really do that. I think that it is something that once I start really nitpicking, I can get behind. But yeah, for me, it was just that stuff really stood out bad in this film.
Yeah. It's a consistent problem with the movies. Sort of that forced strength that's only present when they're wearing the mask. But yeah, like we were saying, like it's not like this is a supernatural mask that gives you superpowers when you put it on. It's a mass-produced mask that anyone can buy. They made that point in this movie that everyone is buying. But which, by the way, that whole thing I find really hard to buy in these movies is the fact that like these masks are so prevalent because, well, yes, that is the mask from a series of slasher movies. It's also a mask that like every few years is worn by people who are committing massacres. And I have a hard time believing that they would stay in mass production after that many times of this happening.
Just with how reactionary our society is,
Yeah.
especially like even in the States here, we're like super like we'll flip out about that shit.
Well, especially in a series of movies that is apparently supposed to be like self-referential and socially aware, that makes even less sense.
Mm-hmm. And I was kind of I checked out Dr. Wolfula's review, and he brought
I was
up a
watching
good
it
point. Yeah, the point of him saying that these movies, because you bring up being self-referential, are kind of
he made a great point.
He did, where it's just like the films are no longer satirizing horror films or what horror films are today. They're just satirizing Stab and the Scream franchise in and of itself. So it's almost like he puts it, and I want your opinion on this, Luke, because I think you'd agree with it as well. It's just a snake eating its own tail at this point, where it's like they're no longer going for what the films initially were as just satirizing horror films or horror films in whatever time and frame that we're in when the film's being made. It's just we're just talking Stab, we're just talking Scream, and that's all we're doing anymore. It's like they're not like they're paying homage to movies, yes, but like references and things, but they're still not getting to the core heart of it. Like they'll say elevated horror 15 times in Scream 5, but the film is never portrayed or acted out like an elevated horror film, like
yeah, I think Scream back from 1996 is in such a different place in 2023 where looking at 1996 and you can go back and kind of lose yourself in that where we're referencing Mrs. Voorhees and all these other actual horror references, whereas in 2023 we're really just referencing the Scream universe and Stab and everything like that. And that's really what it has just become. And one of the things that I was thinking about, and I don't know really where you go because, as I said, a lot of Mindy's dialogue in terms of feeling like Randy and looking back and Randy stuff I can take, and that's fine with me. That's it's referential of that time period. It's new, it's fresh, it's meta. Whereas this time it just seems like a rehash. And I know that's a staple in the Scream franchise, but it's like, are we at that point now where maybe we lose the meta-ness and just go full for just like actual horror, and we kind of lose that? Because for me, a lot of the times, even though it is a staple, it's met with an eye roll for me, where it's like, "Ugh, we're doing this again." Where it's like, sometimes it's like the tension that they built in here, I found myself enjoying that way more than kind of deflating it with, we're referencing ourselves and we're being so meta with it, where it's like, do I even need this anymore? It's like, can we just actually buy a face value Scream film without any of the comedy?
And yeah, I think that we are kind of getting to that point. I think that's kind of the point that Doc was making too in his video, is like, are we kind of progressing past this to the and is if that's the case, uh is the franchise even unique anymore? Like, is there anything left to really kind of, shuffle it through to separate it from its other like slasher knockoffs and things like that? Like, I know Sick I reviewed on our channel, which was the latest Kevin Williamson thing, and a lot of people were comparing that to, the Scream franchise. But like, I would say that these last two films are more in line with that rather than anything that came before it in this franchise. I think that, although I gotta say, like, I give them props for taking on this property, I think that the biggest thing we're missing is really, when it comes down to it, the writing of Kevin Williamson and the creativity and the ingenuity of Wes Craven. And I think that this film cements that for me a lot here, because I think that even with the changing of setting, he would have been able to bring a more unique take to this and wouldn't have been afraid to, not fall back into what they've done time and time again. He would push it. Because even if you look at all four of his films, each one of them, he does something a little different. He stays within the bounds of what people expect, but they're still vastly different from each other in each one. So that's where I feel.
Yeah, it's weird because I feel like where the writers seem to have the most ability was in creating suspenseful scenes.
Mm-hmm.
The scene on the subway, the scene again with the ladder that I've gushed about already. Moments like that where you can tell that these filmmakers do understand how to create a cool horror sequence, but I don't know if they're necessarily very good at writing a meta slasher movie. So
Yeah.
because of that, they're kind of forcing in the meta commentary that has to be there out of obligation because it's just part of the franchise. And you can tell that it's forced because it doesn't contribute anything to the movies. In the first Scream, that meta material played into how the story played out. It played into the characters and how they behaved. Here, it's just people mentioning what happened 3 Scream movies ago and then being like, all right, that's that. Let's move on to the next. Yeah. Like, I don't know.
And for me, like, just looking at meta as a device here in terms of writing, I think, in 1996, it was fresh, it was new. You had New Nightmare prior to that, and the meta-ness there worked. It was something that audiences hadn't seen. I think using the meta device in the Scream franchise in 2023 kind of dates it a little bit, because I think we're past it. And I think, looking back on the original Halloween, where Jamie Lee Curtis delivers the line, "Oh, you're the new Loomis." It's an eye roll kind of delivery for me, where it's like, I don't think I need that. It's that kind of humor in there where I don't think we need that anymore. And I think at this point in time, we could strip away a lot of the comedy, a lot of the meta feelings in the Scream franchise, and I can just buy this as a face value kind of horror film. And I think that's a lot of the things that maybe the audiences want, where it's like, we kind of go in without the kind of, we don't need you to reference every little thing, or, I just want to buy a horror movie face value. I think that's what I'm ready for. because again, in this actual film itself, I found myself enjoying the moments of the tension and the real horror rather than we need to reference everything and let's do the requel stuff. And it's like for me, I know it's a staple in the Scream franchise. I just think I'm past it and I don't need it anymore because, in terms of humor and being unique and new, 2023, it doesn't compute anymore.
No, I think those are very fair criticisms from you both there about that. And I agree. I think that, if we would have taken this franchise and at least done what we kind of touched on a little bit earlier, where it's like they unveil the killer and it's nobody. It's just a guy. It is a crazed, person who's just like, yeah, I'm doing this because, I want to save the franchise and I want to do this. That could have been a little bit of a darker take on the whole Richie thing. Don't sit there and directly sit there and shove it down my throat that, oh, we met on a subreddit and everything. But it's like, no, this actually does affect people, where it's like, it's not necessarily that the movies motivated him. It's the conspiracy theories. It's the true crime nature of what could have happened within the last year of everybody wanting to play detective on social media that really sent this guy down a rabbit hole. And again, we thought that that's kind of what we were getting from the opening, which is the way they kind of approached it. But they did fall back into just the same old with it being the revenge for Richie. And, that really bums me out. But I got to ask you guys, like, where do you see this going from here? Do you see this? Like, I think the only way they could really kind of bring this home at this point for me, and I know this is kind of unfair because this does seem like very fanboy-y and stuff, is I think if you want to do this right, and they may have missed their shot already, is to have Stu come back, have him be an actual definitive Ghostface, and put him behind some of this before. And then, because if you were to tell me that Ghostface or Stu was the one flinging people around and he was the one torturing people on the subway, I would have bought that. I would have bought that full heartedly because he's this crazy guy who's been underground that everybody thought was dead for so long. And now he's here, just killing people, slashing people up, like being kind of the catalyst here, going after his ex-partner's daughter. Like, I think that would have just impacted so much more. And I know some people are divided about that, but I think that's the only way you can go from here to really cement this as being something memorable. Because if they just go with, again, we joked about it earlier, the long lost brother thing, or any other, just like, yeah, it's just someone from the new cast's family member or something like that, or it is what they kind of hinted towards, where everybody in the movie said, oh no, the other killer's Mindy before she removed her mask. It's just like, that would just feel like a waste.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the next movie really needs to do something a little more grand. It needs to be something that's more impactful than new characters that we're meeting now for the first time, because we've done that 6 fucking times now. They really need to do something that can tie things together and feel like, a definitive closure, because it doesn't really feel like we're starting something new here. It feels like they're trying to get things to wrap up. And I part of me would be okay if it kept going because of how much more I liked the core 4 in this movie. I enjoyed watching them. But like, I don't really see where they can take it, because while I like their chemistry, they are kind of just rehashes of the legacy characters. So like, they're not really contributing anything new, as entertaining as they are. So I think they need to, I'm sure 7's not going to be the last one. Obviously, I'm a Halloween fan. I know you got 13 of those. I know how this works. It's not going to stop. But bring things to a close with something. I would totally be cool with Matthew Lillard coming back, because more Matthew Lillard is always a plus in my mind. If we can get more of him, if he was the killer in Scream 7, or if he was involved in some way, I think that would be a really great place to go next. Or Dylan, your point about sort of a cult, and maybe he's kind of at the head of that. As weird as that sounds, I think that could be kind of cool, and it would fit into this world, because clearly, like, stab fanaticism is a very real thing in these movies. As far-fetched as I find it a lot of the time, it's established as a reality. So lean into that and kind of create this like cult of Ghostface killers with Stu Macher at the head of it secretly. And I think that could be a really cool way to bring things to a dramatic close next time around.
I agree. And
After this one, I don't really know. I feel like we're just going to get a rehash of what we've been getting
Yeah,
here.
I think that's what's realistically going to
Yeah.
happen.
I think we've
bummed.
doubled down on the subreddits, and I think we're honestly going to be getting people coming out from there, or again, someone related to Richie or someone. Maybe we'll get the mom come out. I don't know, but
that I've heard that so many times this weekend.
They can make
Mom.
Stu Macher be the Reddit mod.
Well, and to be honest, like the tension that was built from Ghostface, he has a supernatural element to it, and I found myself, I joke with Dylan a lot about Stu coming back and all that stuff, but I felt myself buying it more and more the way they presented Ghostface throughout this.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
With him being so gritty and just having exactly that
awesome.
supernatural element to it. He was great.
So, for me, I would have bought that at the very end here, and I do think they missed the boat bringing Stu back in this one here. I think, again, I'm always guilty of trying to rework things and be like, oh, well, this would have been great and that would have been great. And it's like looking at this and we look at Dermot Mulroney's, he bought all the stuff for his son and everything. And if we would have had Stu still alive and said, he had been transferred to a higher facility because he's a risk of doing whatever. And we would have found out that Dermot Mulroney scheduled a sit down between Richie and Stu had some sort of effect on him. And Dermot Mulroney continued a relationship with Stu. And it's like he's really pulling these strings and getting everyone to kind of do his bidding for him. And then we kind of build up to that in the next Scream. I think we could have, if we would have built on a relationship there, I think would have been perfect. But it's like they kind of just were like, nah, well, he bought all the stuff for his son, and that's really as far as we went with it. And it's like I really do think you needed someone to carry over. If you would have had the two kids here die and Dermot Mulroney move on to the seventh one, and then we're worried about where he's going to be coming from because of he's able to pull these strings, and we would have added that element of Stu still alive in this one, even if we didn't actually see him. I think that would have carried over so many different questions and a lot of intrigue for Scream 7. Whereas, like, now we've wrapped this one up in a bow, everyone's dead. Where do we go from here? It's like now I think everyone's expecting someone coming out from the subreddit, and that's really where we're going to go with this. We're toxic fandom at its finest, and that's where we're going to go with it. So it's like I think again, like 5, I think they built a lot of intriguing questions that they never capitalized on. They did it again here in 6. I think 6 is more effective, but by the third act, we really fall flat, and there's really nowhere to go for 7. So I don't know where they're going to go. I just feel like it's going to be the same thing that we've been getting.
Yeah,
And they an interesting thing, and I might just be kind of pulling way too much out of this because of fandom and frustration and stuff, but like they were quoted, the directors of this, on the red carpet premiere of just saying like, hey, whoever ends up doing Scream 7, whether it's us or somebody else, like we're just happy to have the franchise back. Just a real like softball kind of question, and I may be reading too much into it, but to me it just kind of seems like maybe they don't have a plan. And I'm just gonna say it, like there's been too many franchises in the last 7 to 8 years that just you find out a couple years after the last movie they don't have a plan. And I think you're making that reference, and I don't want to get into this Halloween ends debate.
won't.
I think there was a plan there, but they deviated because of the pandemic and everything. So it's like that's upsetting. But I'm talking more like Star Wars and all these other franchises they brought back, where it's just like we're just kind of going as we go. Like we're writing as we go, and it's just like I don't understand. I get in this debate with my dad all the time about this because we both feel the same way about like I don't understand why when you're coming to a franchise, especially something that's beloved and established, and they can just sit here and say like, yeah, Scream's going to come back and it's going to make a ton of money and it's going to do well. You should have the optics to just at least have some like lock people in and say, hey, we want you to do a trilogy. What's your pitch on a trilogy? They find something they really like, and then like, let's lock into it. Let's commit. Now you can change things. Like even the original film, they had it come out. It was a smash hit. But before that, before it even came out, they had Kevin Williamson write up a draft for 2 more films. And that had to change a little bit because of leaks, which sucks. But I don't know why they're not having people do this anymore. Like, why aren't they at least putting the goalpost there of like, we just need to get to there, so that way it's seems cohesive and it seems fun. I really do, honestly, even though I think that they have left a lot to desire with these films, want Radio Silence to come back and knock this out of the park, just like I did with David Gordon Green every time. I just think that, you know, my I guess enthusiasm for them being able to bring it home, it's diminished a little bit further from this movie.
Yeah, they get enough right that I want to see them nail the other elements, because if they can just get the narrative and the conclusion of a movie right, if they can fix those little narrative issues and how things get wrapped up, then everything aside from that, they've already they're very good at everything else. The movies are shot really well.
Mm-hmm.
They're acted well. The dialogue is improving.
It's getting there.
The narrative is also, I think it's better than 5.
Mm-hmm.
But
a little more original.
And it was more engaging. But if they can just get they're like almost there, and if they can just break through this last door, then we're good. We've got a really great Scream movie. But I don't know, man. We've done 2 movies now, and I don't feel like 5 to 6 showed enough of a step in the right direction to make me confident that 7 will cross that boundary. I hope that it will. And obviously we're all going to be excited for it because it's always fun to see these movies. But I hope it will. I'm not confident that it will.
I get you.
Yeah, and I'm a fan of a singular vision, especially if we're going to be doing like 3 installments here, so that we kind of have that cohesiveness. But if you're kind of running and gunning from script to script without like, well, we just got to get through the next film, and sometimes that's what it feels like we're doing here, especially when we're just wrapping everything up like this. If they had the intention of coming back, I think this is where you draw those arcs. Again, every Scream film has been from beginning to end. We wrap everything up, credits roll, and then we're ready for a fresh start. We're going to have some returning characters next installment. I think this was really the time to do it, to bleed over into the next film. And I think like looking at where we're at in 2023, where it's like everyone's hungry for legacy horror to come back. And, it's like Halloween, Scream, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, whatever.
Evil
It's like,
Dead's next month.
Yeah, and it's like, I think it's intriguing for legacy horror to come back, but I think for any screenwriter, director who's freshly coming into this, no matter what they've done in the past, I think it's a daunting task for them because of that rabid fan base. It's like, we want something fresh, but don't give us something too different, and sometimes you kind of get in your own head here. So it's like for here, Radio Silence, 5 for me didn't really hit. I think 6, we're getting there, but we didn't knock this one out of the park. For 7, I would like to see them come back so we kind of get some sort of cohesiveness here, but I'm not against someone new stepping in and trying to show us a different story here. It's like, if you're going to give us something newer and fresher here, I mean, hey, let's do it and see what we get. Because again, Radio Silence, they did wrap up 6 with a bow, so it's like we can kind of step into 7 and see where we go. I just don't know where you go with it, so it's like I don't know if any of the true legacy characters are going to come back, Gail Weathers or Sidney Prescott, if they're going to be back, or we're just going to have the core 4, or we start a new fresh story. I don't know, but I'm not opposed for them coming back, but I want an actual story. So I don't know, we'll see.
Oh yeah. But alrighty, guys, I think we're kind of circling the drain here on the Scream 6 spoiler review. Are there any other points that you gentlemen wanted to bring up? Is there anything that's itching you that you want to talk about?
I did have one thing in my head where I noticed something about the end of this one that concerns me going forward, because it makes me feel like they're already running out of ideas to explore with this. The 5th movie obviously ended with them teasing Sam as having, that inner Ghostface. And then they kind of just did the exact same thing this time. So to see that, character plot mirrored in almost an identical way 2 movies in a row concerns me.
Yeah, I would say that that is also something I'm worried about. I don't know if we touched on it a little earlier or not, but it was one of those things where that was an element I was not thrilled to see come back with her father. I know it's going to be a staple through all of these now.
So goofy.
It is goofy. I appreciate the looking in the reflection. I buy a little bit more rather than just the straight up mirror and you see him clear as day. I think it was framed a little better, but it's still just a goofy element through and through. But yeah, no, I don't know. That is such a ballsy thing to do, but again, that feels very Halloween ends-esque in a sense of just like that might be a step too far in the other direction that I don't like, where it's like they're going to have her take on the killer and like maybe if we do the anti-hero thing and we see it from her perspective and she's killing killers or potential killers, like that could be interesting. But again, I don't know. It just kind of seems like having her toe the line and have to be the one who takes it to the extreme to maybe get in the mindset of a killer to find and hunt the killers is fine. But yeah, having her suit up and actually go out there and kill her friends, it would be a lot for me to believe that she's going to murder any of the people that she's, been protecting for 2 movies. Like if that's what they're getting at, like that would be major character betrayal. But I mean, that's unfortunately, I think you're right. That's kind of what they're hinting towards.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I don't think there was enough character development in that aspect in 6 to really justify us ever getting that in 7. I mean, like, I like the idea of because looking at Sydney Prescott, we just saw like the PTSD of someone coming for her, and that paranoia of always looking behind you, in that aspect of it. I like that they kind of tease the whole, I stabbed someone so many different times. What kind of mental effect does that have on you? But they didn't tease it enough. You know what I mean? They did the therapist session, and that was really it. Now it's like I really would have loved to have seen them, again, this is my mind going off of them if Sam would have lost time sometimes to make us question if she was behind anything, and her not even knowing 100% if she was or was not. But they didn't really go that route with anything. So they really focused on the Sam and Tara relationship, which is fine, but you can't really set something up in 7, to justify if you didn't do that in 6. So, like for me, it would be a really big jump to try and do something like that. I understand the character development that they're trying to portray here, but it really didn't work from a writing perspective. I mean, we started with the hints in 5, but we didn't really get anywhere with 6. So, I mean, you'd have to make a lot of legwork in 7 to even get us to that point, to even midway through that film to start believing that she would even kind of commit those acts against people that she knows, or I guess you would say more so innocent people. So I think it's an intriguing element. They just, again, I think they kind of fumbled it in 6.
Oh yeah. Alrighty. Well, I guess that about brings us to the end here, guys. So thank you again, Evan, for joining us for all the Scream videos. This has been a lot of fun, man. We'd love to have you back on the channel.
Yeah, I would love to do that.
Definitely. I like this setting of at least getting to kind of air out grievances. Hopefully, one of these films we cover at some point in the future we'll
disagree on.
Love. Maybe that would be great too.
Can we disagree on something?
I mean, hey, I would always be down for a good debate. Luke and I have a couple skeletons in the closet we have to talk about at some point. I know we've been talking about Get Out for years, just us kind of debating on that one. But we'll just have to find something. We'll have to message each other and just be like, "You like this film?" No,
I know anytime. I'll always come back. It's fun.
Perfect. But yeah, as always, guys, definitely thanks for showing up and thanks for watching this video with us. We had a good time talking Scream. Let us know what you guys thought of Scream 6. If you think we're way off base, and give us every reason why, go right on ahead down in the comments. If you guys think that we are right on the same wavelength as you, feel free to vent. Let us know what you think. Again, not the worst movie in the world, but definitely not where I was hoping we'd end up.
It was fun.
But still fun. I agree. But other than that, Evan, where can the folks find you?
Yeah, so I host a YouTube channel called Rockland Graves Productions. I just make horror reviews, often way too nerdy and in depth, and I spend way too much time making them, but I enjoy making them. So check out the channel if you're interested in that.
It's
I'm going
quality
through the
stuff.
Evil. Thanks, man. I'm going through the Evil Dead franchise right now, so I've got Army of Darkness coming out this week. We're going right up to Rise, so check that out. Been putting a lot of work into those videos.
Heck yeah, no, and they're very good too. I enjoyed your
Thank you.
Evil Dead 2 video a lot.
Thanks, man.
But alrighty, guys, that's gonna wrap us up here. So yeah, again, if you're new here, feel free to hit that subscribe button. You know, we are on our way to 1,000 subscribers. We just crossed the 700 mark before the weekend started, so that was a lot of fun, a lot of motivation as far as getting that going. And then we did have our collaboration with Alex over at Beyond the Void podcast, where we watched Carnosaur 2, did like a little Mystery Science Theater 3000 thing going on there. Lots of funny moments. That was a great video to do. I'd love to have you on for one of those sometime, Evan.
Yeah.
We watch bad movies and, you know,
just dude, I'm so in. You don't need to say anything else. I'm in.
Hell yeah. But yeah, no, definitely want to do more of that. So check that video out. Check out our previous Scream reviews, like I said earlier. And yeah, definitely go follow Evan. So until next time, guys, I am Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
My name is Evan from Rockland Graves.
And stay scared.